Hello, welcome to WIRSPA's Rum Maker series. My name is Matt Pietrek, and I'm here with Devon from Grenada, and our guest today is Lennox Wilson from St. Lucia Distillers. Hello, everybody.
Hi, hi, hi.
Hey.
Hey, hi, what's up?
So, for those of you who are not familiar with our Rum Maker series, this is where we interview people who make the rum around the Caribbean. We have other WIRSPA series that you can check out on our YouTube channel, but this series we are focusing on the people who are actually making the rum. In this case, Lennox from St. Lucia Distillers. So let's jump right in. Lennox, first tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing right now, and then go into how where did you come from? Tell us about your upbringing, your early days.
Well, my name is Lennox Wilson. I am the production manager at St. Lucia Distillers. That's in sunny St. Lucia in the Caribbean. And I am a distiller, rum maker. I have been for pretty much all of my working life. I was born in the Garden Parish of St. Anne, that's in Jamaica. Um, for those who are not familiar with it, St. Anne is in the north center of the island. And the most famous town there would be Ocherius. That's the tourist town of Ocherius. So I was born not too far from there. And when I was just shortly after I was born, my parents moved even closer to Ocherius. I grew up in a relatively small but extended family. That was always important to us. Our grandparents were an important part of our lives all the time. Typical Jamaican upbringing. I was involved in track and field like most Jamaicans are. And I did a pretty good 100-meter actually. Not so great at 200 meters. Played football, a little bit of cricket. Cricket just wasn't a big thing for me. And I also played badminton, and I actually was pretty competitive and was on the badminton team at university. I went to St. Anne's Bay Primary School, one of the best primary schools in the island. I didn't stay there very long though. I went through primary school in 4 years, I think it was, 4 years. I, for whatever reason, ended up skipping grade 1 and grade 5. So that was pretty quick. And then I started high school at Fernport High School. That's in St. Anne. I did grade 7 there, or Form 1, as we call it in Jamaica, or in the Caribbean. And then I went on to Kingston and started grade 8 or second form at Jamaica College in Kingston. In the Caribbean, a number of high schools have college in their names. It's fairly common. So you have in Jamaica College, Kingston College, Cornwall College, Monroe College, Hampton College, etc. And in St. Lucia, you have St. Mary's College, and you will see similar things in Barbados and Trinidad and so on. And then I spent 6 years at Jamaica College, and then I went on to University of the West Indies after that.
So what did you study at university, and when you went into university, when you entered, did you enter to study to make rum?
I studied chemistry and applied chemistry at university. Applied chemistry would be the applications of chemistry in a practical way. And at the time, we concentrated heavily on the industrial applications of chemistry. I studied chemistry because I just love chemistry. It was fascinating to me learning about matter and how they interact with each other and how we could use that to our advantage. When I was growing up, this is really strange. My ambition was to have a big office with a big desk. What I was going to do in this big office with this big desk, I have no idea. And that was the situation for much of my youth. I just had no clear idea as to what it is that I was going to do. And but I just knew that I loved chemistry, and I still do actually. And so I studied that, and it wasn't until about the summer of my second year at university when I got a summer job in the lab of a company that made soap, bar soaps, and other soaps. It made detergents also, regular detergents for washing clothes and so on. And that's when I began to see how a job in chemistry could work, because previous to that, I didn't even know that a job in chemistry would look like that. I didn't know for sure. And so that is when it began to be formulated in my head as to what I would eventually do. But rum was not in my mind at all at the time. That came afterwards.
So tell us about your first foray into the rum industry then.
Oh wow. That is interesting, with some drama in it. So when I was preparing for my final exams at university, I heard that some companies were coming on campus. This is University of the West Indies, Mona in Jamaica. Some companies were coming on campus to interview students for potential employment. So I went to student services and got myself signed up. I only signed up for one company, and the company was National Rums of Jamaica Limited. I was fascinated by the name because I'm thinking we have a national rum. So I signed up for one company, National Rums. The day of the interview came, and I remember I was very casual is probably not the right word, but I wasn't worked up about it. When you feel like you have nothing to lose, you just don't make it bother you too much. So I was relatively calm about it. And I think that calmness allowed me in the interview to get into a very heated debate with their then technical director. Now, this interview had about 5 interviewers, which for many persons might have been intimidating. For me, I seemed perfectly fine with the 5, and I got into this heated debate with the technical director. It was about something in biochemistry. Can't remember exactly what it was. And that went on for a while, and we agreed to disagree by the end of the debate. The interview ended, and I was so shocked. In a couple of days, I'm contacted and told that I was being offered a job by National Rums. I was so surprised, and but that's how it started. And I went to see them, and they told me I should go to all 3 distilleries that they own, and then tell them which one I would like to work at. So I'm like, these people are so nice. They're giving me options as to where I should work. So at the time, they had Envoy Distillery, Clarendon Distillers Limited, and Long Pond Distillery. So I only went to Clarendon Distillers and Envoy Distillery. I didn't make it to Long Pond, and I selected one. I selected Envoy Distillery, which was closer to Kingston, and I think that's the reason why I did that, because at the time I was living in Kingston. And but it got even more interesting. After I told them I selected Kingston, they then said to me they'd like me to start working in a couple of weeks. Now, I was just about finishing finals at university. I was physically and mentally tired, I thought. And I'm thinking, I can't start working in a couple of weeks. So I then said to them, this was like about June or late June or something, and they wanted me to start working either in July or August. So I said to them, I would like to start working in September. The people then said to me, okay, you can start working in September. And I said, these rum people are really, really nice. I think I'm going to like working with them. So I had a wonderful summer, had a lot of fun, relaxed myself. And on the first Monday of September of 1990, I reported to work at Envoy Distillery in St. Catherine in Jamaica. And that's when I started into rum. Rum kind of found me. I wasn't looking for it.
That seems to be a common pattern in people we've talked to here in this series. Yeah. So did you eventually end up working, spending time at all 3 National Rums of Jamaica distilleries?
Well, I I worked at Innswood for, this must have been about 7 years or so, or 6 or 7 years. And Innswood is very good for me. I remember on the Monday morning when I went there, this would have been for the second time because I'd gone there during the recruitment process just to select which one I'd like to work at. And I remember walking into the distillery and I took a deep breath and it felt like home. It just felt like it felt right. You know that feeling when you are doing something or you're somewhere and it just feels right? That's how it felt that morning. And I remember just taking a very deep breath at that time. And so I was there for 6 or 7 years. And then I was transferred to Clarendon Distillers, which is one of the other distilleries in the group. I've never worked at Long Pond. I've been there and so on, visited, but I've never worked there.
And I've been fortunate to have visited all three of the energy distilleries, and today, like us rum geeks, we are fascinated with the distilleries that are no longer operating, and so we can today we can still go to Clarendon and see what they're doing. We can go to Long Pond and see what they're doing. But Innswood is sort of like the mystery. It's sort of like the Kearney in Trinidad. It's like it's no longer operating, but once was. Like so Innswood, like what were while you were there, what type of rums was Innswood making?
Innswood was an interesting place. It made light column still rum. There was no pot still at Innswood for making rum. There wasn't, but there was a pot still, but I'll tell you about that in a bit, what that was used for. It made some light pot still rums, some of which would have been sold to various. At the time, it was just bulk rum that was being made at Innswood. National Rums did not have brands at the time. And so there was one called AL 95 and another one called EIL, I remember, that were being made there. Innswood also made neutral type spirit. There was a hydroselective column there that allowed for that. And that was supplied to some of the local customers, bulk. But what was interesting is that there was a pot still at Innswood that was not a part of Innswood's operation per se. It was in a building just across from the distillery. And that pot still was used for making gin. And it wasn't made by the employees at Innswood. Ever so often, an overseas distiller would come to Jamaica. The botanicals would have been sent down ahead of that. But Innswood would supply the relatively neutral spirit that was used for the gin distillation. And I mean, you could go in and have a look, talk to the distiller, see the operation. They didn't prevent you from doing that. And so gin was actually made on compound there at the time. So there was rum, column still rum, and there was gin being made on the compound. But there was more. Innswood was a tremendous learning ground for not just learning how to make rum, but learning how to make the extensions of rum. Neutral spirit, which technically isn't rum. And then there's gin, which was being produced periodically per year there. And at the time, there was also a denatured spirit operation. So basically what happened is rum or neutral spirit from the distillery will be pumped across into another building in which you will have denatured spirit being made. So when COVID came and then the distilleries are being called upon to make spirit as sanitizers, I immediately called upon my knowledge way back then. It was very easy. I understood how you could just do it very easily because I'd done it so many times before. And so that came useful. But there's more. Innswood also had at the time a vinegar factory, which was about 100 meters from the distillery. And I was also involved in that. So what would happen is spirit from the distillery will be sent over to the vinegar factory. And there'll be another fermentation which takes place there. That is a bacterial fermentation using acetobacter in these fermentation vessels that were called acetators. And so vinegar was also produced there. So you got an opportunity to learn not just the production of rum, and then the fermentation, distillation, and blending of rum and so on, but you were able to learn some things that were connected to rum production. So it was a very good area to learn a lot in the industry. And I took full advantage of it. I was very excited about the industry when I got there, and I took the opportunity to just take it all in and learn as much as I could as fast as I could. Not just in the distillation and fermentation and so on, but I got a chance to learn maintenance, to understand maintenance. I mean, at university, you learn the components of a pump, designs of pumps, but had never seen a pump dismantled and reassembled, you know. And so you take the opportunity to learn that. You theoretically learned about boilers, but had never seen the inside of a boiler. So you have to really throw yourself into all aspects of the operation. That's the best way to do it. And I think I learned that pretty quickly and took advantage of that.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I learned when researching Innswood in National Rums of Jamaica history, when I was writing Modern Caribbean Rum, one of the interesting things I learned was that there was this vinegar company, and it made total sense. And it was just, what is this? But yeah, and it closed at some point, I think in the late 1990s. But on the subject of National Rums of Jamaica, I assume you interviewed with and later worked with Evan Brown, who was a previous WIRSPA chairman and somebody I dearly love to talk with. Tell us about your experiences with Evan.
Wow. Oh, my mentor. When I joined National Rums, and he was one of those in the interviewing panel when I was interviewed for the job. He had already been in the industry for decades, and so it was a wealth of experience that we're talking about here. There's such a thing as being at the right place at the right time, and I think I was at the right place at the right time when I joined National Rums. But you can be at the right place at the right time and still don't get the opportunities that you need or you want or that you deserve. But I think for whatever reason, through Evan Brown, I was able to get opportunities that were very valuable to me when I was relatively young. I mean, I found myself at board meetings at 22. And it was quite interesting to me. I'm sitting there like before the meetings would have started, and I'm looking around and I'm seeing a bunch of persons, many of whom could be my parent or even my grandparent. And I was by far the youngest person in the room. And, you know, it made you question the validity of you being in this gathering. You work with it, you make your contribution, and my contribution was, for the most part, technical contribution to the discussions. But I learned a lot. I learned a whole lot from him and from being exposed to this sort of situation. And it encouraged me also to develop myself some more, because just think of leaving university with a science degree and being thrown into a situation where you're managing people. You suddenly find yourself being sent financial statements each month. You're in a very highly unionized environment. You have to be very careful how you manage people, because an industrial strike could just happen any time. And I realized, well, I told myself that I was not as prepared for this job as I think I should be, because all I had was, for the most part, was technical training. And so with him kind of pushing me to get into management at such an early age, I got myself registered into a diploma in management studies program very quickly. I did that. But that was, I'm not sure if that worked so well for me, because what I found with that diploma program is, for each topic that we were doing, as soon as I got very interested in the topic and excited about it. It was over. So this anticlimax just wasn't working for me. So before I was finished with that diploma program in management studies, I got myself enrolled in a master's program in business administration. And a lot of this, like I said, has to do with being exposed to management and realizing that I had to get myself properly qualified. So I got registered for that. And so by the time I was 27, I had already completed the diploma in management studies and the master's degree in business administration. And I felt at that time that during the process, you begin to feel a lot more comfortable. You begin to feel like you have kind of mastered this thing a little better than before. And so thanks to him for affording me the opportunity to do that and push me to develop myself. And he has done the same for so many others who have gone through the company. So on behalf of all of them, Mr. Brown, I say thank you.
That's great. That's
If
great.
you're watching.
I had the pleasure of meeting another prolific Jamaican distiller, Vivian Wisdom. I understand that you went to school with him.
Yes,
tell us
I
about-
did. I did.
Tell us about that.
Not just school. We have worked together actually. I met Vivian, and we call him Whitney, Vivian Wisdom, at university. Actually, we happened to have been in the same chemistry lab class, and in those days you were assigned you're put in groups based on your surname. It was done alphabetically. His surname is Wisdom, mine is Wilson. We were in the same lab group, and so that's how we met. And a brilliant gentleman, very analytical, very technically strong, and we ended up working on the same sugar estate, on the same estate at Moneymusk, at Clarendon Distillers. At the time, he was working in the sugar factory, and I was working in the distillery. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware, but even though these days the sugar factory and the distilleries tend to be owned by different organizations, they have different ownership these days, they work very well together. Very often, the staff on both companies are managed by one group. Payroll is run by one group, and union negotiations and agreements is just one group, and so on. So we worked very closely together. So we interacted a lot at the time. And then he came over to the distillery. I don't know if I had anything to do with that. I might have influenced him a bit because he's very brilliant, and that's somebody you want to have around. And so we worked together at Moneymusk for a little bit. And then when I left and went off to Ray Nephew, eventually he also started working at Ray Nephew. So we have worked together for quite a bit. We've had myriads of technical discussions. We share ideas on how to resolve things. And he has worked in the farm, the sugar factory, and the distillery. So he has been the whole range in the industry. So yes.
So, Lennox, you mentioned you're National Rums of Jamaica. You've worked at Innswood. You've worked at Clarendon, Moneymusk, and now you're at Ray and Nephew. So, which Ray and Nephew distilleries were you at?
Well, I joined Ray and Nephew as the quality assurance manager, and then my job title was changed to operations manager. But it was for both distilleries in the group, both New Yarmouth Distillery and Appleton Distillery. So all that time I had responsibilities in both distilleries. Did a lot of work on fermentation, trying to get the fermentation efficiencies up at both, and did some work on column still distillation at Appleton. And I was involved in all of the projects for the distilleries at the time, all projects. So even when I was quality assurance manager, I was also involved in projects. And then when I came operations manager, even more, all of the developmental projects. So that was an interesting experience for me.
So by this time, at this point, you work at 5 Jamaican distilleries. Like you work all over Jamaica.
I have worked at the only places I have not worked are Long Pond and Hamden.
Okay, and any more any more other than before you went to St. Lucia? So that's the only 5 year work that, and then before you went to
Well,
St. Lucia.
something rather interesting happened, and I mean, I'm always open to learning new things, and they, because of the way the rum industry is, it's a traditional industry. You're talking about an industry that is hundreds of years old. And so things are done in a very traditional way, most of the time in most of the distilleries. And so you can find that the wheels of change can turn very slowly in the rum industry, in the distillery, because of the traditional way in which things are done. So when I learned of this project at Worthy Park, that they were going back into rum after having been out for over 50 years, you're talking about starting a brand new distillery. That felt so exciting to me to be a part of something like that. And what made it more interesting, our instructions were design and build a distillery that is as automated and as efficient as possible. That was like music to my ears, you know? And so I joined that project, and what that did for me was allow a kind of technical expression that it was just there, pent up and needed to be let out. Worthy Park allowed that for me in a number of ways, because you're starting anew. You don't have to be dealing with a culture of rum making, tradition of rum making. You're starting anew because really was nothing around from the more than 50 years previous to that when they were doing rum. So, and then I ended up working with a pretty interesting gentleman, an engineer, who at the time had many, many years, maybe 50 years of experience as an engineer. And he had experience in being an engineer in a brewery. And what I have found is that there's a whole lot that a distiller can learn from brewing. When you do a brew in a brewery, you have to get it right. If you don't, it's so difficult to recover. You will have to dump that brew if you're not careful. You have to get it right. So it can become a bit of an exact science. Now, in a rum distillery, fermentation is what will make or break a distillery. So if a distiller understands fermentation well, he can make that distillery, because that substantial transformation is what is so critically important for a distillery. And so having been working with this engineer, and he has this experience in engineering in a brewery, I have experience in a distillery, we were able to design a distillery where the fermentation house was designed like you would in a brewery. And it made for a very, very efficient fermentation. The fermentation efficiency at Worthy Park was just absolutely amazing when I was there. And I suspect it's still the same today because it's a culture of Worthy Park to be efficient. And bear in mind that Worthy Park used the molasses that was produced there, and the sugar factory is extremely efficient. And so you're talking about molasses that had sugar content in the low 40s, very low. And unfortunately, in that geographical location of Jamaica, the ash content of the molasses produced there was relatively high, 12.5%, 13% ash. Very unfavorable conditions for fermentation. However, because of the robustness of the design of the fermentation house, the fermentation efficiency was just absolutely amazing there, and the flavors that were generated were extremely good also. So it was a tremendous thing for me to be a part of that. We also, I should add, at the time it was just a large pot still that was there. And we decided to automate this pot still. Now, to automate a double retort pot still is not an easy thing. I remember the day when we were commissioning that pot still, I must have been the most nervous person on the planet. Because, with a double retort pot still, if you don't get the interlocking correct in the automation, you can develop vacuum in various sections. And once that happens, you're going to have a tank, a part of the color of the pot still collapsing. And so, we're very careful with that. And so, but it worked, and it worked beautifully. And it did an amazing thing for us in that when you automate the pot still and you have detectors all over, controllers all over, and you have a situation where for every single cycle of the pot still, you are recording all of these parameters constantly for every single cycle. Just imagine the wealth of knowledge you gain to have all of those for every single cycle of the pot still. And so our knowledge and understanding of the operation of a pot still was just amazing after that. I mean, simple things like you have the temperature of the liquid in the kettle. You also have the temperature of the vapors just above that liquid, and you have the temperature of the vapors beyond that, and the same kind of thing in the retorts. And you go to the end of the still, and you have a mass flow meter constantly recording the density and hence the alcohol strength of the distillate for the entire cycle, every single cycle. Your steam flow is constantly being recorded, your steam pressure, everything. And you had all of these readings for all the sections of the column for every single cycle, a wealth of information. So Worthy Park for me was a reflection of what I had learned previous to that. And that distillery at the time when I was there was able to produce pot still rum at a lower cost than other distilleries were producing column still rum. And that's not easy to do, because if you just think about the distillation efficiency alone, comparing both of them on a column still, you should be hitting the very high 90s, 97, 98% distillation efficiency. On a double retort pot still, you're going to be lucky to get anything higher than 85%, maybe 86, 87% if you're lucky. So just the distillation efficiency alone tells you that inherently a column still is going to give you a lower cost of production, higher efficiencies. And then for the pot still distillations, many times the wash that you're using would have been allowed to develop more congeners at the expense of alcohol, which would be reflected in a lower efficiency, because you're reducing alcohol and you're producing maybe more esters. And that's what would be fed to the pot stills. And so with all of that, Worthy Park was still able to produce pot still rum at a lower cost than many others were producing column still rum. And so that was just amazing for me, was a good thing. And I'm glad I was a part of that project.
Yeah, and I think that's something a lot of people don't realize, is that Worthy Park basically started fresh in 2005 or so, and basically got to use all of the latest technological advances, like you mentioned, sensors and automation and so forth.
Yep.
So at this point, like you are Mr. Jamaican rum, like you've been almost everywhere in Jamaica, and then you go to St. Lucia. Like, how did this happen?
What? Yeah, that was something. I was driving to work one morning and I got a telephone call on my cell phone from this lady who had an accent which was clearly West Indian, but I wasn't sure where she was from. And she said to me, and she introduced herself, the pleasantries, and then she says to me, there is a production manager job at a distillery in St. Lucia. Are you interested? I said to her, so where did you get my contact information and so on? And she said she can't tell me. So there was this very awkward moment in the conversation. And then I said to her, okay, send me the details on the job and I'll have a look at it. And at the time, my mind was not even there, because when she said St. Lucia, I'm trying to remember where on the archipelago St. Lucia is, because I didn't even remember. So I told her to send me the information. I gave her my email address, but I suspect she had it, but I gave it to her. And 10 or 15 minutes later, when I arrived at the office, I checked and the email was there with the details of the job. I looked at it and it looked interesting enough. And so I went home that evening, had a discussion with my family. We spoke about it. And the next day, I sent her an email and basically saying to her, let's explore this. And so we explored it. But for me, learning a different way of making rum, a different rum culture, that was always going to be interesting for me. Note, I had worked at almost all distilleries in Jamaica by this time. So so doing this was quite interesting. So within a couple of weeks, I was on an airplane to St. Lucia for a job interview. And a couple of weeks after that, I was back on an aircraft going to St. Lucia to start working. And that's how it happened. I mean, St. Lucia just was amazing to me. It was the day when I came for the interview, there were multiple cruise ships in Castries Harbor. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, in this little space, all of that activity. And everybody just seems so calm and no rushing from here to there. Jamaica can be very busy, and St. Lucia was not busy.
So you started as the production manager at Lucia Distillers.
Yes, I did.
You started that, and that's your current role today.
And my job title has not changed, but there's been an evolution of the portfolio, but the title has not changed.
So what being a production manager at St. Lucia Distillers, what it's like from working in all the distilleries in Jamaica and then going to a smaller distillery and being a production manager, from the initial role to how it evolves now, what it's like?
It's a relatively small operation, but small is fine. It's when the operation is small, it actually allows for more flexibility. Remember I spoke about how the wheels of change can turn slowly in the distillery. Well, the smaller the distillery, the easier it is to have changes made, and that can sometimes be a good thing. It's fascinating here, the different distillation systems that exist. There are 3 pot stills, one of which is a very interesting design, a hybrid still, which is like a kettle and a pot and column combined, because there's a kettle with a rectifier on top. You don't often see that type of design being used to make rum in the Caribbean. There are a few distilleries around that have it, but it's not a lot of them. When you see pot stills in most distilleries in the Caribbean, it would be a double retort pot still most of the time. So to see a different type like that is interesting. And then for the double retort pot stills, and there are 2 of them, the one is much smaller than the other, and it actually makes a difference, a significant difference. We believe the difference has to do with the surface volume ratio in the vapor lines, the gooseneck and the other vapor lines there, because that matters. We believe that is part of what influences the differences in flavor that you get from the double retort pot still, just based on their differences in size. And so St. Lucia Distillers has those variabilities. And then there is a coffee column still, which is just, of course, 2 columns. And that allows you to retain a lot of the flavors that were generated in fermentation, because you're not distilling the hell out of the wash, you are retaining flavors. And so when you put all of that together in this small operation, relatively small operation, there's so much flexibility. And in addition to using molasses, there's also sugarcane, which is in the mix. So a lot can happen in that operation, and a lot has been happening. So it was quite interesting to me. And I also found that there was a lot of contribution that I could make from a technical perspective in the operation. It's always a good thing. I don't know if it has to do with the way I felt my development was enhanced when I started in national rums, especially at Innswood. But it's almost like I feel I have a mission to assist with the development of others. And when you have been given the responsibility to manage someone, you should do the best to professionally take care of them. And so the development of people is important to me. And I have made a lot of effort to develop the persons within my department. I make sure that they're as well trained as possible. You can join my department at a level a little lower than we would have preferred, but if you have the right attitude, the right aptitude, and interest, things can happen because we will make sure that you grow and develop. And so I felt I could make these contributions here, and so it has worked for me. And so I've been here for quite a bit.
So obviously, yeah. That's good. That's good news. Interestingly, you mentioned the design and capacity of the pot stills and the column stills, and of course the passion and the growth of the staff in the production of St. Lucia rum, and all those factors are very important in terms of the uniqueness and what makes a bottle of St. Lucia rum so unique. What other factors you think could attribute it to the uniqueness of a St. Lucia rum?
Where St. Lucia Distillery is, it's on a plain, kind of elevated, and there is a range of hills that literally arch around the plain. And so leaves the range leaves the sea, goes around the plain, and the other end of the range goes back to the sea. So if you visualize that, it's like a backdrop of hillsides, and the plain is there, and the distillery is in the middle of that. And what that has done is, in terms of the water that is available in that area, you're looking at the constant washings of nutrients from the hillside down onto the plains, constantly enriching and re-enriching the soil and hence the water in that area. And then there's this microclimate which is created because of the hills surrounding the valley there. And there's a humidity that is able to be maintained within that area. So you have the water, the chemistry of the water being impacted by what's happening with the hillsides. The ocean is there. Things are happening on the ground from the ocean, because the ocean is just like a mile on the plains from where the distillery is, or a mile and a half. And so with respect to the water, things would be happening there that would make the St. Lucia rum different from others. As an illustration of the impact of water, when we were working on the geographical indication specifications for St. Lucia rum recently, we decided to look at various ways in which St. Lucia rum would have been different from others just based on the conditions under which it was made. And we got some water from Barbados, and we chose Barbados because Barbados, unlike many of the other islands in the Eastern Caribbean, is mostly limestone rock, while most of the others tend to be volcanic rock. And so we felt the water in Barbados would have been different from the water in St. Lucia or St. Vincent or Martinique or so on. And so we got some water from Barbados, we imported some water, and we did some lab trials where the only difference was water from Barbados versus water from St. Lucia. And let me tell you, the fermentation results were totally different. We distilled in the lab the fermentation, and the sensory values of the distillates were also quite different. So water makes a difference. And so just that alone, and I just explained what's happening with the hillsides and so on. So there is a uniqueness there with respect to that. The sugar cane that is grown in the valley would be impacted by the how fertile the soil is in that area, and that would have implications for our sugarcane production. And one of the most amazing things I find at Innswood at St. Lucia Distillers is the maturation that takes place. You can start out with a pretty basic distillate, put that in wood, and put it down in St. Lucia for a couple of years, and the magic that happens is just amazing. We think it's related to the microclimate in the area and the humidity that exists there, but aging in St. Lucia works very well. And so if you combine all of those factors with playing around with aging in different types of wood, which we have started to do more and more here, it's limitless, and you know what you can do, and it's just it's good to see it all evolving here. So special.
I think many rum fans would agree with that. In recent years, St. Lucia Distillers has been sort of more out front in terms of like interesting releases, things like that. We'll touch on that in a moment. But people like Denny Duplay, Master Blender, now we're seeing more of him out there and talking about St. Lucia rum, and
Yeah.
distillery manager Ian John. Like, how do you all interact with each other? Like, how, like, sort of who does what? Who's responsible for what?
So I am responsible on a daily basis for blending and bottling, and I engage in lab services, general lab services, and I also do a fair amount in product development. So to the extent that I'm involved in product development and lab services, I would interact quite a bit with Denny. Denny and I interact with each other multiple times per day, every day. It's so important that we do that. He's a master blender, and so he has a lot to say about the formulations and also what happens in aging. So he has to interact quite a bit with our cask manager, who we now call our cellar master, and a Cyril Mangle, and together they make sure that our aging process is fine. And Ian deals primarily with the fermentation and distillation operation. What I do in blending and bottling is just an interpretation and an expression of everything that these guys are doing. They're producing the distillates, they're producing the maturates, they're developing the formulations, and I'm just putting it all together in a form that the consumer can relate to. So it's an interpretation and a presentation of their work, and so it requires a lot of interaction. I might not interact with Ian on a daily basis as I would with Denny, because part of my responsibility is providing sort of consultancy services to the fermentation and distillation operation, whilst not having direct managerial control over it. And so if there are issues and concerns and so on, then I would have discussions with Ian, and we decide how to tackle things here and there. And I've also been able to provide a fair amount of training. I remember many years ago when I just arrived here, I did some training on pot still operation, because like I had explained, having gone through the Worthy Park experience of the automated still and being able to appreciate what happens through each cycle, every cycle, our knowledge and understanding of the pot still operation has improved so dramatically. I mean, I knew how to do pot stills from before. I was part of the whole process of automating, clearly, but when you see it like that and understand it better. And so I've been able to do training in distillation here, initially starting with the pot stills, And we have seen how that has positively impacted the distillates and the way those distillates then age for post-still operation here. And I've recently been doing the same thing with column still operation, doing some training of the staff in the distillery on the operation of column stills. Because luckily for me, when I was coming into the industry, especially at Innswood, I would literally run the stills myself. I would run the fermentation operation myself, so this is something I'm very familiar and very happy doing. And
Yeah.
so I'm able to share this knowledge with the youngsters here to get them up to speed. So
It's
that is
interesting.
the kind of how the interaction goes with Ian and Denny.
It's interesting. It's interesting how you express the interaction with Ian and Danny and what you do. I like what you say. Your job is just an expression and interpretation of their work.
Exactly. It
That's
is.
nice. How you should put it in. You know. Yeah. Yeah. That's very nice
That's an
language.
important part of my job in a way
Exactly.
that the consumer can relate to it.
Can relate to what.
And
Yeah.
and and
What's
and
going
that's
on?
and that's it. Yes.
It's a good team. It's a good team. So just tell us 3 or 4 of the top things you do on a daily basis. It seems as though you have a lot. You interface with those departments and then you do training. But
Yeah,
on a normal
yes,
day,
yes.
when you just walks into St. Lucia Distillers, what are 3 or 4 of the top things that's on your list to do on a daily basis?
Well, the first thing you do when you're walking into a plant is you're looking around to see what is not in order. You do that and you listen to the plant. I've learned to listen to the plant. When the tempo of the plant changes, something is not right. And so you look and you listen. So that's the first thing you do before you even get to your office. You're already doing that. When I get to my office, I would then quickly check to see what the production was the day before. Now, I would have had a good idea what it was anyway, but the final numbers, I would need to see them. And I would check to see if we had any issues and what the issues were and whether they have been resolved. I have a ton of meetings. These are just constant meetings all the time. And so more than likely I would end up getting into one of those meetings very quickly. But quick knowledge of the production and any issues. Now, the company has been growing. Our production requirement has been growing and growing. Our new owners, GBH, has made some serious investments into the distillery and into aging warehouses and also into the blending facility. But the investments have not yet touched the bottling facility. So we have a bottling plant which is literally bursting at the seams. And with equipment that is a couple decades old. And so maintenance becomes a critical part of keeping the plant going. It always was, but for what I just described, you can imagine how critical maintenance is at this point. And so one of the things I pay a lot of attention to these days is a maintenance program. Any issues we had, we have our maintenance program on the software, and the work orders are almost generated automatically. Are they being addressed? We need to be on top of maintenance all the time. So that is also critically important for me. So in the middle of all my meetings, those are some of the things that I would pay strict attention to on a daily basis.
Since Spearbam GBH bought St. Lucia Distillers since 2017, I recall. So we've gone from here's Chairman's Reserve, here's Admiral Rodney to now there's multiple Admiral Rodney expressions, countless, and as geeks love this, but countless sort of limited releases and, pot still only, long age, this crazy number of different expressions coming out.
Yes.
How do you keep up with all of that?
Never a dull day. Oh my Lord. Never a dull day. I'm looking for a dull day and I can't find it. We're very busy. We're very busy. And that's a good thing. We have this barrel program where we release, major customers will purchase barrels and then we bottle for them and they get to put their logo on the labels. This is done under the Chairman's Reserve brand. And then we have been making some other releases, limited releases as you mentioned, all of them, all of the major international brands. So it's very busy for us. So the product development team has a lot to do, and I'm involved in that on that team, and so there's always a lot to do there. We are so thankful that GBH has purchased the company, because what it has done for us is to get us to become part of the international, global, really, distribution channel of Spiribam. And so our products are being fed into all of this, and we just feel that one of these days it's just going to explode so much. It's just amazing. So we've got to be preparing ourselves for all of that. We're very happy to see that going on. Admiral Rodney is very interesting. We're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. Admiral Rodney is a 100% column still rum. There's no pot still in Admiral Rodney at all. And we've now, initially we started out with just one Admiral Rodney, and that has now been renamed Admiral Rodney Royal Oak. And so we have two others, an older one, Admiral Rodney Formidable, and a younger one, Admiral Rodney Princessa. But it's all column still rums, and the variability can become difficult when you're just dealing with column still rums. And that's one of the interesting things about St. Lucia Distillers. Now, most people believe that in terms of quality spirit, it's really pot still that you're looking at to get the very high quality spirit. Our most premium brand, Admiral Rodney, is a 100% column still rum. And yet we're able to do this and do so well with it. And that's because we have a coffee still, just 2 columns, and we're not over distilling the spirit. We're retaining a lot of the flavors in the spirit, notwithstanding it being a column still, and forms an amazing foundation for aging and maturation of this. And so we're able to do this. But we're going to have to do some special things to introduce some variability, some more variability to Admiral Rodney. It's more than likely going to be looking at different types of woods, aging in different types of woods. That's going to be an important part of that. So we will see how that evolves over the next couple of years, couple of decades, maybe. And but Sherman's Reserve, which has both pot and column still in it, a whole lot can happen, and has been happening there. Then there's Bounty, which we have begun to introduce a little bit of pot still into when we created Bounty Dark. And so a lot going on, a whole lot going on, and we're very happy with it.
Yeah, obviously, you bring a lot of the production of rum. I mean, coming from Jamaica and working at mostly all the distilleries there, and the contribution you made, and then going to St. Lucia. What are some of the things that you are most proud of at the time at St. Lucia Distillers?
I had kind of touched on one of them already, and it's the development of the people that you have been entrusted with to look after them professionally. And that, like I mentioned, is important to me. And I think I have made the effort. It's not unusual for me to, when budget is being prepared, to prepare a training budget for every single person in the department. Because we need to identify the needs and train and retrain to get people to where they need to be. And it is not unusual for me to literally go out there and find programs for our employees to do. And thankfully, the company has been very supportive of developing people academically and professionally. And so when I prepare these budgets, I'm able to get the support of the company to make things happen. So I've gone out there, gotten degree programs for people, and have them have a look at it, and many of them have gone on to do it, or other, professional programs to get them to do. And so that I've been able to do in a very significant way. Some of the times when I develop training programs for my department, in looking at it critically, I'm thinking, but this should be done for the entire company. And on a number of occasions, those programs have been extended to the entire company. And I'm very happy to have been able to do that. Also, when I joined the company, there was a quality assurance program, but it was not well developed. It was not cohesive. The organizational structure did not reflect a very robust quality assurance facility. And so I designed one, developed the job descriptions for the various persons in that facility. And after some effort, eventually got it approved. And we have been able to institute this quality assurance facility, of which we're quite proud. And it's working quite well for us. So those are two of the things that that come to mind. And also I'd mentioned the training in distillation, so that we were able to improve the quality of pot still rums over the years, by having improved the distillate quality, consistency of the pot still distillates. And so those are some of the things that come to mind in terms of what I would be proud of being at St. Lucia Distillers.
Yeah, I mean, our earlier conversation, you mentioned about quality. I know you're very passionate and proud of the achievements in the quality assurance and quality control. But also, and it's the first time I heard the statement, put in that phrase, when quality is too good. I think you're the author of that statement. May you tell us a bit about that?
And it can be overdone. What is quality? It's the extent to which you achieve or exceed the expectations of the customer. And yes, it's true that sometimes you can manage the customer's expectations, but sometimes you can't. It's there. So what you need to do is to make sure that whatever you deliver either meets or exceeds the expectations of the customer, so your product remains attractive to them. So we have a number of quality parameters, how we measure quality. And I think all of the quality assurance, quality control practitioners need to be cognizant of the fact that you're just trying to achieve or exceed the expectations of the customer. And there is no need to go way beyond that at the expense of your production cost. You operate in a business environment, and you have to make sure that you're always cognizant of the fact that that's the environment in which you operate. So you don't go do excessive amount of sampling, especially destructive sampling, if it is not giving you any returns. You can begin to get diminishing returns if you do too much. And so there are some regulatory requirements that you cannot get away from, like your alcohol strength determination and keeping within the tolerances for alcohol strength. You cannot get away from that. But there are some other things, like, say, maybe the color of your spirit, maybe the turbidity levels of your spirit, where those would have been developed based on your own statistics and your expectations of what they should be. The practitioners have to be aware that there is some flexibility there. It is not as hard and fast as you would imagine. Maybe if the turbidity of the liquid is just slightly higher than it was last year, it would not result in hazing of the liquid. And therefore, there's nothing to worry about where the customer is concerned, because the customer is never going to see haze, because it's never going to develop if the turbidity is just slightly higher. If the color was by reading slightly darker, by reading that is than you're accustomed to, if the standard customer can't tell the difference between one that is slightly low and slightly higher, should we fuss about the fact that the color is just slightly higher today? In other words, I'm saying, be very aware of your standards and your specifications, but bear in mind that there is some degree of flexibility, and it might even require reviewing the specifications. And never forget that you're operating in a business environment. Every single decision made by the quality assurance, quality control practitioner needs to make business sense to the organization. And business sense also includes not getting it wrong where the customer picks up something that is wrong. So it's a balancing act. And we need to make sure that you don't lose your balance one way or the other.
Yeah. So, as we mentioned in the beginning here, this is a WIRSPA series here, and St. Lucia Distillers is part of WIRSPA. Uh, Tell us about some of the benefits you personally and or St. Lucia Distillers has from being part of the West Indies Rum and Spirits Producers Association.
Yeah, WIRSPA is very important to us. It's been there for a while. WIRSPA is pretty much as old as CARICOM itself. I think they're about the same age. And it's important. You can achieve so much more when you act together than if you try to do it alone. You know, the concept of synergy. The whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts. And that's what happens with an organization like WIRSPA, for us to come together and be able to be bigger than if we were individuals on our own working. One of the things that WIRSPA has been able to do in recent times, and maybe not so recent times, is the sharing of technical ideas. The rum industry, for sure, in the English-speaking Caribbean, we have traditionally been very kind of secretive about the things that we do and how we do and so on and so forth. And we were not sharing ideas enough, I don't think. Whilst you don't have to give away your best secrets, your best kept secrets, there's an extent to which you can share ideas and help to develop each other, because, you know, both parties will benefit. And I think WIRSPA has been very instrumental in getting that right for us. Lots of technical seminars, conferences, alcohol schools here or there, you know, and getting us up to speed and sharing ideas. And there's a togetherness of the different persons in the different producing countries of rum in the Caribbean. We're currently working on a revision of the CARICOM regional standard for rum. And I am not even seeing how we could have done this properly without the presence and the assistance of WIRSPA. They've been tremendous value in assisting us to get this done. You can feel it. So in the same way we have CARICOM, and we hope that will go even further, WIRSPA is in the same vein. And I think this is a joke that I've shared with some people. I think organizations like WIRSPA and CARICOM are putting us one step closer to this dream of the United States of the Caribbean. Devon, have you had that dream yet?
Sure. No,
The United States of the Caribbean. It's fascinating.
Sure.
So anything we do that pushes us one step closer to that, can only help. And WIRSPA is one of those steps. Rum is so important to the Caribbean. It's an important part of the history and culture of the Caribbean. I often say if you want to study the history of the Caribbean or the Americas, I dare say, study the history of rum, and that would be an amazing start.
Yes, I can absolutely endorse that. As somebody who does history. It's very true. Yeah. So, Lennox, final question. Your favorite St. Lucia Distillers expression to drink?
That has got to be Chairman's Reserve, the Forgotten Casks. It's absolutely delicious.
I can't argue with that. I agree.
It's not very heavily aged. We're talking about 7.5, maybe 8 years of aging for the spirit. But it is an extremely good balance of pot and column still rums. For me, it's a sipping rum. I either have it neat, or I might just put a little bit of water to open it up a little bit. Or I might put a small ice cube that would not deliver too much water. Or you could put a large ice cube, which actually melts slowly because of the lower surface volume ratio. But you don't need too much of anything, and it's just an amazing sipping drink. Good balance, lovely. So that's what I would go for first, more than any other. Chairman's Reserve, the Forgotten Cask, amazing. And what also makes it good for me is the story behind it behind it is very relatable to me. I mean, I was here during the development of that story. I hope all marketers are telling that story as loudly as they can, because I find that when something is relatable, you tend to appreciate it so much more and enjoy it so much more. And that's for me, Forgotten Cask is like that.
Well, thank you so much. Lennox, it's been a pleasure to chat with you.
Oh, we're
For
done.
the past
Okay.
hour or so. Yeah, we're wrapped up here. Yeah, any final words you want to say before we sign off?
One of these days, I would like to see rum assumed again its proper place in the landscape of distilled spirits. I don't think rum is placed as highly as it ought to. Rum is very special, fresh off the distillation system. Very tasty. You don't have to age it for it to be very palatable. There are other distilled spirits that are seemingly more premium in the way they're looked at, that are almost undrinkable coming fresh off the distillation systems and have to be run through charcoal, etc., before being aged. Rum is just amazing, fresh off the distillation systems. You then put that into wood, and what happens is just magical. And so it would be important for us to see rum being given its rightful place. And when you drink rum, it's not just an ordinary drink. You're talking about hundreds of years of history and tradition and culture. You're getting a taste of not even just the Caribbean, you're getting a taste of the Americas when you consume rum. It used to be used as currency in some of the olden days, you know. It was that important to the region. And so I would like to see the day when it again is back in that very premium position that it so truly deserves. And I hope I challenge all marketers to help us to get there, get the message out.
Yeah, well, you and I share that dream. All right. Well, Lennox, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you for
Same here.
spending time
Thanks
with
for
us.
having me.
And